for the videos of broken up by the different sections that we will go through. So if you don't want to watch a full 2-hour video, you can click on little, maybe less than 30-minute videos that I have recorded about this work. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and introduce you to our fake client, Z Test. They were enrolled in our program this morning. We went through and talked about all the caseload management functions with the exception of the leasing process. So today we are going to cover all of those pieces. When you first log in, for folks who did not attend the morning session, you will notice that there is a new CaseWorthy dashboard. This replaced the CaseWorthy Manager dashboard. It has a ton of useful information, at least I think. And what you'll notice is there are 3 pages: My CaseWorthy, My Clients, My Agency. The overview page is essentially just like your news feed. It gives you access to information about your caseload. If you are a supervisor, please be patient with us. We are trying to release all of the supervisor functions. So that's coming slowly. We do have the My Staff link here, but you will also, if you're a supervisor, see My Staff's caseloads alerts as well. So that should be coming up soon. The question about documentation of training is here. So if you attended any training with us, you will notice that there is a training history. So I have not gone in and taken attendance for CaseWorthy 101, but when I do, if you were attended, it will be marked as attended. If you were absent, you will be marked as absent. So this is where that question, I think Chanel had asked, where will I see that I have taken it? This is the place. It's also the place to sign up for upcoming trainings. So if you are interested in the emergency financial assistance training that's happening in February, you can sign up straight from here. We will be adding more and more trainings to this calendar, so you want to keep an eye on this because there will be training requirements that are coming down the pipeline soon for your program. The other thing that you want to pay attention to is these quick links. So if you work with a program, you will have access to the directory. So this gives you contact information about your program staff at AFC. If you ever want to call them directly, ask them any questions, that lives there. And all of the forms and documents that are required for your program. So this also includes forms for housing. So if you are, doing housing work and you need a blank form, it is here. These are the alerts. If you're past due on a contact, assessment, any lease information, you can click in here and it will give you access to client level information about your clients and where they are in the process. Okay. I'm not going to cover too much, but this page gives you overview of the My Clients. If you need access to data on their assessments and contacts, at an overview, you can see that here. All of these things are clickable. You can go in and look to see across your caseload their status. It's the same thing for housing placement and leasing. So if you are interested in looking at just your dashboard of what your client's performance looks like, how many clients are on an AFC subsidy versus an alternative subsidy, which ones are active versus expired, you can see that from here. And if I wanted to know which 2 clients have no lease, let me work on that, I can click on it and it'll give me access to that information. So these two people, I've not even started their leases. I should probably get going on them. And this one, it looks like the ball is in my court. The unit ID has been started, but I still did not finish that. Okay, and it's been since November. Okay, so let's go to the client's profile. Okay, on the client's profile, one of the pages that we didn't cover this morning was housing placement and leasing. When you click on that, there is going to be a dashboard that opens up. And at first glance, it is very overwhelming because all you see is a bunch of words, and I don't know where to begin. I always like to say that I like to break this up into three different columns, right? Because that's how it's laid out. The column to the left is going to be like your alerts column. It gives you information about your client's lease and what items you need to take action on. So because this is a new lease and this client is new to the program, you see here, there's no alerts that are needed, and it's telling me I'm awesome because I don't have anything. It also gives me information about the program, the enrollment dates, and all of that fun stuff. The column in the middle is actually where you do all of the work, right? This is where you're gonna start and create a new lease, do your renewals. Everything that happens mostly is gonna happen here in that middle column. The stuff on the right, this column here that doesn't have really anything right now, this is basically like your current lease card, if you will, for your client. This column will give you information about the lease that we have on file for this client. It gives you the information about the payments. It gives you access to change the lease. It'll give you information about the payments and so on. Right now, this column looks kind of empty, right? Because this is a new client. We don't even have a lease on file. But once we submit that lease, you're going to notice more things populate. So we will revisit this one. Okay. Now, how do I get started? Before I do anything, I need to make sure that the client is, number one, enrolled in the program, and that there is an assessment in the system to prove that the client is actually enrolled in the program. Okay, so before I do this, I'm going to go to case management. I'm going to go to enrollments. Remember, CaseWorthy 101. We talked about how to check for assessments. I'm going to check, is there an assessment on file? I see that there is. This one was created today and it was actually completed, so that's good. And it's not connected to any lease. This is going to be important, right? So if a lease is connected to, sorry, if an assessment is connected to a lease, that means we need to update the assessment, right? Because if you are doing a new lease or you're changing a lease, that means either you're renewing, moving the client, or their income or some other aspects have changed, which means we need a new assessment. But this is good because we don't have it connected to a lease. It is completed, so we're good to go. And this status is enrolled. So that's good. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is go to this column, the second column of the page. In terms of placement and leasing, there are two sub-processes that you have to do. There's the unit ID and the lease submission. It's broken up into two sections. The unit ID is basically like identifying a unit for the client that you're working with so that they can actually move into that client, into that unit. This unit ID needs to get an approval with your program staff, right? Before you move towards any lease signing. So even though you may find a unit for a client, you need to submit that in CaseWorthy, get an official approval by our staff, by your program staff, right? And then once they've approved it, you can move on to submitting the lease and all of the other stuff that we'll talk about. The lease submission part of this is actually not your program staff who does this. It is our rental payment processing team who takes the information that you submit, which includes the rent calculation and all of that fun stuff. They review it and then will approve it if everything is there, right? Once they've approved it, then they will cut a check for the client so that it'll go to the landlord, but it's on behalf of the client. That will go every month to the landlord. Okay. I want to pause really quickly and say, just because, so this is unit ID, this is lease submission. If at any point you need to review a video or information about any of these processes, click here. If you prefer to read instead of a video, you can do it this way. It gives you information. I'm a visual person and I like videos. So every single walkthrough that I'm going to go through today has been broken up into 30-minute videos that are connected to YouTube. So when we go through the unit ID, this will be the walkthrough that I use. This is the lease submission. And then once we get that lease in the system, I will be talking about lease changes and how to do moves and all that stuff here. We have the utility assistance walkthrough and then how to complete the documents here. Okay. So feel free, all of these videos are under 30 minutes, so you're not watching long videos on how to do this. They're just quick and you can follow along. So that's here. It's right on the dashboard. Click here. I'll also share the video for this recording. Okay. So let's go ahead and just jump right in. So the first step is the unit ID. I'm going to go ahead and start the unit ID by clicking that button. Right away, you're going to notice that this form populates. There's not a lot of information here, right? I always like to say, look out for the things that are highlighted in red, because it's usually the things that are highlighted in red that requires my attention. I'm going to zoom in a little bit just because it feels like small. So housing unit, let's do it. Click into the magnifying glass. And what you're going to do is you're going to find that this opens up a list of over 5,600 units that we have in the system. Okay. So before you hit that add new housing unit button, please look in our system to see if that unit is already there, because it might be, right? So if you have the address, please look but using the address, or you could search by landlord, right? So my address, or my client's address, is actually 180. Did I freeze? Let me do this again. 180 North LaSalle. Already I'm seeing that it's not here, right? Because it's not even, well, actually not true. I just needed to wait a minute. Let's click this one. It's unit number 5. So I'm going to look here and see, this is unit number 1. I don't see unit number 5 in the system, but I did notice that there were 2 different versions of 180 North LaSalle. Let's click this one. Still no unit 5. Okay. I do want to look just one more way. I'm going to look to see if Aziza Test Landlord, which is the landlord that I have, has a unit that's 180 North LaSalle. So I'm not seeing that here. Again, always start by searching. You may find your unit in here, okay? If you can't find your unit, click on Add New Housing Unit, and this is where you add the unit. So just like we talked about in CaseWorthy 101, we use Google API to look up addresses. So I'm going to do the same and look up 180 North LaSalle. And I found it on the list. I don't know if you noticed, but as soon as I saw it on the list, I clicked it. Next, I'm going to look for the landlord. Now, just like the unit, you want to make sure to look for the landlord in the system. We have a ton of landlords in the system. We have over 3,300 landlords, okay? So I know that my landlord's name is Aziza Test Landlord. I just typed in Aziza and you'll notice that Aziza Test Landlord popped up. But let's say I didn't find my landlord. You can always click Add New Landlord. I mean, it's not a long list. It's just like add the landlord's name, if you have their contact information, and then their address lookup, and then their tax ID. Okay. I'm just going to use Aziza Test Landlord for this demo. Next, it's going to ask me what kind of building. So 180 North LaSalle, I believe is a high rise. But if I wasn't sure, I can click the map it option. What's going to happen is it's going to give me a street view here. Feel free to use it to guess, is this a high rise, a low rise, a mid rise? And this is how we define it, right? So 1 to 4, 5 to 8, 9 plus. This is definitely a high rise. You can also select townhouse, duplex, single family house. These are important because this feeds into the calculation of how much we can support your client in terms of rental assistance, right? So all of this is important to get it right because you want to maximize how much assistance a client can receive based on the demographics of the unit, right? So when I click high rise, you'll notice that now I need to answer more questions. Remember when we talked about this morning, if you were here, there are questions that come up that are nested underneath other questions, right? So for the housing unit, it always starts at the building level, big picture, and then it starts to drill down at the unit details. So because I said this is a high rise, it's asking me, does this building have an elevator, right? So I'm going to say yes, right? Next, disregard this, only we can see this, but this is just a quality check to see if the area is pulling in correctly. So disregard this, you don't see this. Next is drilling down to the unit level. So we entered the building information. Now it's asking me about the unit itself. So remember I said the unit number is 5. It's actually located on the first floor, even though it's unit 5. Is this ADA accessible? Again, this is highlighted in red. I need to pay attention to this. For some programs, if ADA is required, they have other incentives to be able to offer clients other opportunities. This doesn't apply to everyone, but we want to make sure that if this is a unit that can accommodate somebody who has ADA requirements, that we know that this unit is flagged, right? So let's say, yes, it is. It has an elevator. It has all the requirements of ADA. So I'm going to say yes. If you're not sure, just mark it as no. It is a required field. And then we can reevaluate if we find out later that it is. In terms of bedrooms, I'm going to say this is a 1 bedroom and a 1 bath, just to keep it simple. But obviously, if it has more bedrooms, you're going to want to select those. Okay. And then in terms of market rate amount, how much, putting the subsidy aside, how much does it cost to rent this unit? So when you ask your landlord at the viewing of a unit, how much is it to rent this unit? This is the dollar amount that you're going to put here. I'm keeping it simple for this demo. You know, $1,000, 1 bedroom, 1 bath in downtown Chicago is like not realistic. I get it. But we're just going to keep it simple. You would just put whatever the actual dollar amount is here. All right. The next question you're going to be asked is what type of housing this is. Now, we have 3 different options. Market rate is just a standard regular unit, right? So most of these are going to come in as that. However, if your client is moving into a senior housing situation or an affordable housing situation, you can also select those. Total square feet is not a required field, but if you have that information, please include it. It'll help our inventory and also look at, you know, the characteristics for us across our system, but it's not required. Before I get into the unit details, I just want to remind folks that if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I will create space later in the training for folks to ask questions. But if there are questions along the way, please put them in the chat and I'll try to address them as I go along. Now, remember, big picture, and we're drilling down, right? So now we're talking about the details. So we said the unit is 180 North LaSalle, unit 5, $1,000 for rent, blah, blah. Okay. Now we need to look at amenities and utilities. So in terms of unit amenities, these are the things that we're looking for. Does the unit have laundry facilities? Okay. Does the unit have management or maintenance on site? Does the unit have air conditioning? And are pets allowed? Okay. Same with unit utilities. Now remember, all of these questions, again, we need to get the best or closest answer to what is the true answer at the unit viewing. So when you're going to look for a unit or you're calling a landlord to inquire about a unit, obviously you're going to want to ask these questions, right? How is this housing unit heated? Are all the utilities included in the rent? Is the stove or oven gas or electric? These questions are all going to be incorporated into the calculation for how much a client will receive in allowance or assistance, right? So you want to make sure you're asking these questions of your landlord. So are all the utilities included in the rent? For this demo, I want to say no, because I want to show you how this feeds into each other. The heating source, okay? Let's just say it's gas, right? How is the stove or oven fueled, right? Gas or electric? Let's say gas. And then how is the water heater fueled? Let's say electric, just so we can switch it up a bit. Once you have all of these, you're going to save this. And you'll notice, remember that first page when we signed in and that red housing unit popped up? You'll notice now, because we added that unit, all of that information populated in here for you. Now, we're human, we make mistakes, right? It's going to still ask you to verify the information you've entered. Meaning, is everything that you entered up here, all the information above, correct? If you accidentally notice that you entered the wrong monthly rent amount, or you said it was a 1 bath or 1 bedroom and it's actually a 2, right? Do not select this or click here. Just say no, it's not correct. and answer the questions here to correct the information. It's going to ask you, is the unit address correct? Yes, that's not the problem. It's going to ask you what information is incorrect. Let's say it's the rent amount. Okay, great. Update the rent amount from here. Okay, so let's say it's actually $1,050. When you save it, you'll notice that it automatically updates for you. Okay. Then it's going to ask you again, is this correct now? Once you hit say yes, this button will appear to save and continue. Great. Now we've identified the unit, but we are not done with the unit ID step, right? Now, the unit identification requires that you complete these three things. You need to do a utility allowance, a rent reasonableness, and we need an inspection of the unit. Number one and number two are dependent on each other, meaning you have to do number one to get to number two. But number three is its own standalone thing. So you could do the unit inspection at any point, right? Let's go in order so we don't miss anything. Number one, the utility allowance. Remember how I said that the unit demographics and information here is related to the calculation. Here's how the first way it's connected. So remember we said, no, the client is actually responsible for utilities. If that's not the case, you can switch it and say, yes, all the utilities are actually included and save. If the client is responsible for some utilities, we will need to identify what utilities are not included. Before we get to this, CaseWorthy is going to be annoying and continue to ask you to verify information along the way. It's not because we want to be a pain, but it's because sometimes, as you all may know, landlords will change, information in the middle of the whole process. And so things may get entered the way that they were told to you in the beginning, but it ends up being something else when you actually get into the process. So this is what we entered for unit information. If this is still correct, we could say yes. If it's not, you could say no, and there's an edit button that will appear. Same with the heating stuff too, right? So if you end up going out and you realize, oh, the stove is actually electric. No, this is not correct. Let me go back and update that this is actually electric. Of course, CaseWorthy is annoying me today because this is a fake client. So, but that's how you would do it, right? So clicking no, click update. I'm going to say yes, the information is correct. David, to answer your question, there is no time limit for how long you have to edit. However, if you submit something, it gets bounced over to the person responsible for reviewing. If things are wrong, they may reject it and send it back to you. But there isn't like a hard stop of how long it will take before the system, erases your information, for example. Okay, so now we verified this information. The next step is utilities. We have to identify which utilities are not included. Remember, not included, meaning the client is actually responsible for these. So the first thing you want to do, enter the start of the lease start date. Let's say it was January. Okay. Now we have to select the utilities that the client will be responsible for paying. Okay. So let's say the client is responsible for electric and they're responsible for cooking, and heating. I don't know if this is a real scenario. Sorry if it's not. I'm just throwing a bunch of stuff on here just to show you. Once you've identified the things that are not included in the rent, you want to click this Calculate Utility Allowance. When you click Calculate Utility Allowance, CaseWorthy is going to take the information you entered, meaning it's going to look at the unit's location, the city, the county, the area. It's also going to look at whether this is a high rise, low rise, mid rise, and the bedroom size. And it's going to look at the chart that the county provided us in terms of allowance. So based on this area, this is Cook County, we have a chart that gives us the allowance. It's going to give us how much allowance we at AFC can offer in terms of assistance. Now, I selected heating, cooking, and electric, okay? But CaseWorthy also said, hey, your client is also eligible for assistance with range, refrigerator, and this fixed charge. So this gives my client a total of $123 in maximum utility allowance. Now, I just want to reiterate this. This is the maximum amount of allowance that we can provide based on this unit. This doesn't mean that the client is going to be reimbursed or given actually $123 of assistance. I'll repeat, this isn't the reimbursement amount. That amount will be calculated based on the client's income. So we'll talk about that later. But totally right now, we're at $123 of allowance for this unit. Okay? All you have to do is review this and hit save. Great. So now I've completed the first step, which is utility allowance. Now, step number 2 was the rent reasonableness. For rent reasonableness, the way that we review whether a unit is rent reasonable is by looking at 2 things. We look at fair market rent, and we look at comparable units in the area that are similar in characteristics to the unit that you are trying to move your client into. Fair market rent, okay? So this is not, this is something that HUD releases every year. It's a chart. And they're the ones who set the standards for FMR. But here's how we review this. This is the rent amount that I put in. I said that it's $1,050. Here is the utility allowance. What we're looking at is gross rent. Is the gross rent at or below this dollar amount? What is gross rent? It's basically this number plus this number, and the system automatically does it for you. So rent plus utility allowance gives you gross rent, okay? Now, $1,173 is under $1,560. So I think I'm good for this. I'm pretty sure that this is going to be considered approved. If I wasn't sure, I could always look at this number, which is the percent of standard FMR. As long as this number is under 100, you are good. That means that you're within the FMR limit. So if you don't like to look at actual dollar amounts and compare, that's fine. Use this. If this is under 100, you're good to go. Now, for some programs, if you are working with a program called the Flexible Housing Pool, they go up to 110. So if you work with Flexible Housing Pool, As long as you're under 110, you're also good. Remember how I told you all CaseWorthy is going to be annoying and keep asking you? You can also edit the rent amount from here if it's not correct. There's still opportunities to edit this amount. So I want to just show you what happens when something is above that 100%. You see how this is over 100? You also get this warning. This warning is telling you that this is over the FMR guidelines. It's not going to prevent you from submitting it, but it's telling you that this is likely going to get denied. Okay? Unless your program manager reviews this and decides they want to give your client an exception. But we don't do, it's rare that we do exceptions. But if it does go over, you will need to justify here in the comments why you decided to submit a unit that's above FMR, knowing that this is going to get rejected. So sometimes we do need to submit those, right? As long as you justify why you did that and your program approves, the system is not going to stop you from submitting it. All right, I'm going to change this back to 1,000 so we don't upset our CaseWorthy birdie. And then we're going to move on. So comparable units. So remember I said we need 3 units that are similar to the unit that we're proposing. So for folks who've been around for a while, we used to require that you go to Google, find us 3 units, and submit those in CaseWorthy, right? We've streamlined this process to where we've made our units available to you, and you can select units in our system that are similar to the one you're proposing. So how we do that is you click the magnifying glass. It's going to give you a filtered list based on the characteristics of your unit. So based on the city and the neighborhood of my unit and the bedroom size, they said, hey, we got 48 units in our system that are similar. You can select any of these. So I'm going to go ahead and select any of these, right? So here's 2 of them. Let's say your client is in a unit that you look it up and there's no units in here. I think the first thing you should do is try to remove that neighborhood filter to expand your search. Sometimes the neighborhoods are too close together and we don't always get a ton of units because it's filtered by neighborhood. You'll notice that just removing that neighborhood, I got more units to choose from. If you're in a city or your client's in a city where we still don't have units, you can always add a unit off of Google from here. Okay. So just for this demo, I'm just going to grab what's in the system. Sorry if they don't exactly align. I just picked any of them. But you want to pay attention to these characteristics. You want to make sure the bedroom size is similar, the type, the building type. I know I selected low rise and mid rise, but you want to make sure the type is right, similar, and then the rent and other things here. Okay. So fair market rent looks good. This is under 100. We have our 3 comparable units. I don't have to fill out comments. You notice that the required comments box is no longer required because based on what I entered, it looks like this is a good unit. Okay. Now I need to sign this. Okay. And I'm also going to save my signature because I don't want to have to keep signing this all the time. So I'm going to save it. And you see it pulled in. And it also is time stamped. Once I hit save, you'll notice that both of these now turned green. Remember, we're still on the unit ID, right? When we clicked into step number 1, we identified the unit, we went and did the utility allowance, and we just finished the rent reasonableness. If you need to edit the utility allowance because you messed up something or things are wrong or the rent reasonableness, if you scroll down, there's a checklist detail and edit buttons here. So you can go back in and edit all of those steps. You'll notice there's still empty space here, and this is still red. This is the inspection step. So we need to do a housing unit inspection. Click here. And basically it's a document upload. If you need a blank version of the housing unit inspection form, you can view and download the form from here. There are 3 steps to it. It seems kind of long, but there is so much instruction text in here that once you've done 1 or 2 of these, you're just going to fly right through them. Once that is complete, you're going to need to identify if this is an initial, a follow-up, or a final. So if you are renewing, it would be a follow-up or a final. We really don't focus too hard on this inspection type. We care about this date, right? Because an inspection on a unit is required annually. So today is the day we're going to do the inspection. In 2026, we will need a new inspection. And then you're going to upload a completed one. So it's going to pull up your file explorer. Okay. And then you're going to do the certification. So did this property or unit meet all the standards? I'm going to say yes. And then what the status is. It passed. Based on all of those items in the form, it passes. If it doesn't, you can upload an updated version later once the deficiencies have been addressed. Just so you know, if it is past deficiencies, what's going to happen is most likely your program staff will kick it back to you until that passes with full standards. Remember, I stored my signature, so I'm going to use that stored signature and then hit save. Okay, this is all green. That's a good sign. I also see this. It says you're ready to submit. There's a save and submit button here. If it's not right in your face, there's also one right here. Save and submit. Once you hit save and submit, it'll take you back to your dashboard. And you'll notice there's no button here, right? You'll also notice that the alerts has changed. It says that it's been submitted and we're waiting for approval, right? So what's going to happen is once you've hit submit, that application for the unit ID is going to go to your program. Your program is going to get an email that's going to say, Aziza Nassar at AFC just submitted a unit ID for Z-test. It's going to be an alert on their dashboard. They're going to open it up and review everything that you've submitted. Once they have reviewed and approved or denied it, you will get an email back to say, hey, log into your dashboard so that you can continue on with the process. I'm going to stop sharing really quickly, and I'm going to review this really quickly. Ariana, I see your hand. Do you have a question while I'm doing this?
Yes, just one quick question before I jump off. In the utilities section, I know before there was like a glitch in the system where I forget which utility it was, but majority of the utilities were already selected and we had to deselect certain ones before we actually submitted the utility part. Has that
Yes.
glitch been fixed, or do we still have to take that step in making sure that the right utilities are actually selected?
We have mostly fixed the issues. It depends on how old the lease is. So if you notice them, please still review and unselect and also report it, right? We need to catch all of the ones that are incorrect because we moved into this process a little over a year. We're still seeing some older leases that are coming in with that issue. So yes and no, we fixed it moving forward, but if you're still updating on leases, there may be some that still have that issue.
Okay, and then
So,
one more thing. I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
And just one other thing. So sometimes we have leases where it's time to start the lease renewal process, but for whatever reason, it will say the lease renewal process was already started and we have actually not touched anything. Do we know why that has happened? Because I know that has created some issues with some of the workflows for my case managers, and then we have to put in a ticket, to get things corrected. So are we aware of why or how that happens, or would you like for us, I mean, again, to just keep submitting a ticket if it does show up?
Submit a ticket. We've asked our internal teams to not do that, but I think it is a result of some programs. If they have like internal like landlord engagement teams or teams that are supporting the process, if they hit start on any of these, yes, you will see an error. Like there will be challenges to submitting that renewal. If you see that and you want to abandon that started renewal, just reach out. We will cancel it so that it does not look like it started. That is an internal thing that we need to stop doing. So I will own that. I am so sorry, but we still run into this issue of our staff are starting the leases before you guys, and you guys are having issues with that. So,
Okay, thank you.
yep. Barbara, I see your hand. Can you please put it in the chat? I am going to continue on because we are at 1:55, and I want to make sure we cover everything. All right. So while I was answering Arianda's questions, uh, my program person, my imaginary program person, did actually went in and they noticed that they approved that unit ID. I got an email, and the email told me that I need to log back in because there was action that happened for Z test on my dashboard. You'll also notice when I went back to the dashboard that now the lease submission part says you are here. So now I'm at the second part of this process. What I also notice is here, there's a button for lease submission, and this alerts has changed. It now says unit approved, lease not submitted. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go into the lease submission workspace. The lease submission workspace looks very similar to the unit ID because we set it up that way. This process has 5 steps, not 3, and all of these are actually contingent on each other. So you want to make sure, I think with the exception of the documents, they're contingent on each other. So we'll go through them in order. The other thing I want you to pay attention to is once a unit has been approved by your program, the unit is locked in, right? However, if you need to make changes, if you click this gray box, it will allow you to make changes. Now, if you do make changes and it puts you over FMR, it will kick you back to get another approval. But if it is just like minor changes that don't impact the FMR, then you don't need another approval, right? But I wanted to let you know that the unit does get locked in into these steps once you've gotten that unit ID approved in step 1. But this is the place to edit. If you have any updates to utilities or rent amount, this is where you go to enter those updates. Let's go into the rent calc. I think the most complicated part of this whole process is the rent calculation. However, we have just, we've tried to make it as automated as possible so you are not having to do these calculations manually. But I think it's important for you all to understand how the system is calculating these things so that you can make sure the system is correct, right? So CaseWorthy is not flawless, as some of you already know. So, all right, before I jump into this, Barbara says, just to piggyback about is there a list of exact utility credit? Can I get, yeah. So Barbara, please connect with Anne. She will give you a chart. It has like all of the allowance amounts, and you can use it to compare it to the system. All right, so these are the things that are already pulling in based on information that you've entered in the chat. So things that are purple, mostly just verifying. Things that are red, these are things you want to probably enter into the system. So rent amount was 1,000, utility allowance was 123. We calculated this in the first step in unit ID. But if you need to make an edit, again, it's going to be annoying. It's going to give you the option to do that. Click here. It'll take you back to the rent responsibility form. This guy, right? This is where this came from. So you can totally edit from here. Okay. Income. This is pulling the assessment income. Remember when we first started this process, I said, hey, we got to check to see, is the client enrolled? Do they have an assessment? And if you could think further back to this morning, the assessment had a financial assessment that we selected all of the income types. That's where this is coming from. Can't remember that far back. Click here. This is the form I'm talking about. Remember, I said the client has 0 income, but also I did the thing that I told you all not to do, and I didn't switch income from any source to no. You can edit that from this form directly. Okay. This is the client's income. This is calculating the annual income. So basically, it's taking this number and multiplying it by 12. And then it's doing this stuff here. Now, I'm not going to go into earned income disallowance because not all programs have this. But if your program offers earned income disallowance, and if you want more information, it's here. It'll tell you what this is. You put the earned income disallowance amount here. CaseWorthy will use that and subtract this number, the allowance, or sorry, the annual income from this to give you the reduced annual income. Most of you guys will not have this, so it's going to end up being 0. Tanisha, we have not gone over documentation. You are right on time. We're about to do that soon. All right, so income here. 0 income. We're keeping it simple for this demo. Then this is the monthly, this is the annual, EID, and then the annual amount. All right, this is everyone's favorite part, deductions. What does deductions mean? Every time you answer this, or there's a dollar amount here, it will take, it'll give your client a credit towards their rent, right? Now, I wish I would have added household members. I always forget to do this. If the client is elderly or disabled, which every single one of you all, your head of household should be, your client will get a $400 credit, or we call it a disability deduction. So they will automatically get $400 taken off of their rent right off the bat. Even though this is asking for how many elderly or disabled family members there are, the maximum allowed individuals is one. So even if the household member has a child or a dependent that's disabled, you can't add two. This is not going to give you more than 400. Now, for household dependents, how we define this is any member in your client's household that is under 18 or under 25 and in school will get a $480 credit, a dependent deduction. I'll repeat, if the client has dependents, meaning they have members in their household that are under 18 or under 25 and in school, they will get $480 for every single dependent. Because my fake client has no dependents, it's pulling in zero. If you get to this step and you're like, wait, Z-Test has a child, click here. It'll take you to that members page. For the folks who joined me in CaseWorthy 101, remember that request to add? This is how you add a household member. Add them, and then just save this until AFC adds that dependent. So you can get a $480 deduction for your client. Because this client does not have that, it's marked as zero. Okay, more red stuff. Annual expenses for disability or elderly household. If there are expenses that your client is paying for that isn't funded by a program, meaning, let's say, for example, the client is paying out of pocket for a nurse or an attendant, care provider, or a bill that is related to their disability, you can add this as an expense that they're paying out of pocket. Same with here, if there are medical expenses that they are paying, again, out of pocket, not through a subsidy, you can add it here and it will give them a credit towards this, okay? And yes, Barbara, that's in addition to the $400. So if they have a dependent, they would have $480 plus $400, which would be $880 as a credit. Okay. Some examples of these expenses that I've seen people submit are like their insurance premiums that get taken out of their Social Security check, right? I think it's like $100 if not more. You can add that here if you can prove that they're actually getting this money taken out of their income. Okay. Now then, CaseWorthy uses this number and it does these calculations. So if there are out-of-pocket expenses, it does do this math here, and then it gives you total non-reimbursed, as well as 3% annual gross, and so on. You can look at the math if you want later. This is how we calculate it. Once you've submitted all of this information, you're going to hit calculate rent. And it's going to give you basically a receipt. It's going to do the line items of how we went through to calculate how much subsidy we are actually going to pay here for the client. It's all calculated based on this HUD-HOPWA rent calculation. And it tells you here where we're getting these numbers. So if you want, to manually calculate it, you can calculate it here. The thing I want to focus on in this training is this section, Part B, because I think this is the most important thing for you as you're working with your client. The total utility allowance, remember, this was in step 1, we calculated it was $123. This is not the reimbursement for utility. This is how much they're maximum eligible for utility. The thing that is actually the reimbursement amount for utility is right here. It's based on your income, and we'll look at that later. So because the client has 0 income, they actually got the full $123 for utility. Same with monthly rent. Even though this is the monthly rent, this is actually the subsidy amount right here, $1,000. So again, because the client has 0 income, they're getting the full amount. However, you'll notice that if the client has more income, if dependents are incorporated, right, you'll see these numbers, they won't match. It's all going to be dependent on the family structure, how much income, the rent amount, specifically the gross rent amount. So number 6 and number 7 are really what actually is going to be given to the client or on behalf of the client, right? So this is the subsidy, this is the utility amount. Once I hit done, we're done with step 1. That was a lot, right? If you need to go back to the rent calc, it's down here, click edit and update, and you could do that from there. The next part is an easy one. Just enter the lease terms. When does the lease start and end? Is it a 12-month lease or a month-to-month? So we said the lease is going to begin January 1st. We're on a 12-month lease. So let's say it will end December 31st. And these are the things that we automatically calculated based on the rent calc, but it's still pulling it in for you just to verify. Hit save. Step 2 is done. Now, this is the step that Tanisha was asking about, the documents. Lease documents. There are 4 documents that are required for the lease. Now, there are landlord documents that are also included. These are just the documents that are for the lease that you need to submit to AFC. We need a fully executed valid lease with the VAWA addendum. Clicking this will give you access to the VAWA addendum. You can click here and download it. We need current proof of income or no income. We need the client participation agreement form. Again, all of these are going to be linked off of here and also on your My CaseWorthy dashboard. And then the rental assistance landlord contract that is here. I don't know why that's rendered weird. This is a lease between the client and the landlord. This is on behalf of the client, right? So the client will give you proof of income. This is a client agreement between AFC and the client that the case manager needs to sign with the client. And this is an assistance agreement with the landlord that does require a landlord signature, and I believe an AFC or a case manager signature as well. So just keeping that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and upload these files like we do with any document. It's just a upload to the system. Can I get somebody to confirm that they are still there? Are you guys still here? Did I lose you?
Nope, all good.
We're here.
Okay.
We're here.
Sweet. I know it's a lot.
Here.
Okay. I'm going to move a little faster because we are at 2:12 and we are not done yet. Please put your questions in the chat. I will try to take them as we go because we are going to dip into question time. All right, you'll notice all these turned green. Again, you can delete them if you accidentally uploaded something that is not correct. It will automatically check it off as completed if you've entered all of the documents that are required. Now you'll notice that the landlord documents are marked as complete. That's because Aziza Test was already a landlord in the system that somebody else used, right? But you want to make sure that the documents. Can somebody mute?
When we were trying to find him to be your donor, it was hard to locate him, and yeah.
So this looks like Aziza Test was already in the system. If if your landlord's already in the system, you just want to make sure to verify that the W-9 is still the right W-9, if the EIN letter is still the same, and so on. Otherwise, you can use the documents that are on file. And then the last step is that rent request. Again, this is mostly just a verification. It pulls in the lease, begin and end date, and then all of this rec calc stuff that you enter. The thing about this rent request is this is what rental payment processing will use to determine, okay, what kind of setup should we do for this client for the subsidy? What additional fees are they needing for us to cut, right? So if there was a security deposit or a admin fee or so on, you would add it here. There's no application fee. If you say yes, there is a box that will open up. And then if any back rent is owed, let's say, yes, there was back rent for January that never went out, put the month or months and hit save. I went through these kind of quickly, but they're pretty straightforward. The documents are just an upload of the documents that are completed, and the rent request form is just any additional fees that the client accrues as a part of the lease. So if you need to go back and edit any of these, the edit buttons are at the bottom. You'll notice that a save and submit is here and a save and submit is here, right? The other the other cool thing is it does let you know, hey, this client is eligible for utility assistance. So we'll talk about the utility assistance in just a second. I'm going to go ahead and save and submit to take us back to the dashboard. Yes, Jackie, there is an income document. It is a part of the lease documents. It's step number 4. It asks you to upload proof of income. You'll notice that the button is not here. And then this status has changed. You'll also notice that utility assistance button is available for request for utilities. So I'm going to go ahead and request utility assistance. Now, at the top, it's going to give you the details of the utility. So remember I said the allowance is not the reimbursement amount, it's the allowance amount. But based on the client's income and rent portion, we calculate a utility assistance amount. So based on the details of the utility, I said that the client is responsible for electric and gas. If I wanted to look at the details, remember I said heating was natural gas, cooking was natural gas, and so on. It consolidates it into the two buckets, okay? Because these are all electric and these are gas, and these are the totals. So for electric, I'm going to bill for the entire $56. Let's say they're going through ComEd. And this is where you put the account information. Make sure this account number is actually what's listed on the ComEd bill, because this is where the check will go. It's going to go to ComEd with that account number. Same with gas. Let's say they're going through People's Gas, and you put the account number. Once you hit save and continue, it's going to ask you to upload the most recent bills. So for electric, it's an upload of the utility bill. And remember, I'm going through this quickly, but we have videos of how to complete any of this. So if there is something that I am just flying through, feel free to look at the video or request support, and we can go over it with you separately. Once I've uploaded the most recent electricity bill and gas bill, I'm going to hit save and submit. So now I've submitted 2 requests to rental payment processing to send out checks for Z-Test. One was for the landlord for the rent payment, and then one that was utility for that utility payment. And you'll notice that here there's no button. So I'm going to stop sharing. If folks have questions, please put them in the chat or raise your hand. And while I review this, to push us through to the lease changes. I should get like music, because this is always the awkward part where people are just waiting for me. Okay, I am done. So just so you know, if your client's lease ends up getting pushed back for some kind of revision, what you're going to see is actually sorry, I didn't switch roles. They must be doing some kind of maintenance work on CaseWorthy today because it's been slow all day. You'll see a button here that allows you to go back into the lease submission, and the step will be highlighted in red. You just need to edit the thing that they asked you to edit. So a couple of things are going on with this dashboard. You notice that we have a current lease now here. It has all the, oh my gosh. I don't want to click it because it's going to refresh it again. So sorry, give me a minute. Did I take the Jan? No. Okay. You'll notice that the lease information is here. It's giving you this like alert that's saying, oh my gosh, you need a new assessment. That doesn't mean you need an assessment right now. It's just saying that if you plan to do anything on a lease, you're going to need to do an assessment first, right? Because we used up our last assessment, if you remember. That doesn't mean that the client is due for one. It just means whenever you do anything again on leasing, you want to make sure to do an assessment. Okay. So try not to be overwhelmed by this. It is kind of abrasive. But one thing I really wanted to focus on really quickly for a few minutes is this lease changes. So we know that sometimes lease information changes during the lease period, right? There are a number of different reasons why a client's lease may change, meaning the client may have loss of income, right? Which means that their rent calc is going to be different. The landlord's address changed, so they need a new W-9 so that the check goes to the landlord, right? There are all these different reasons where you can select. What will happen is once you select the reason, a button here will open up the flow for you to be able to make that change. Now, before you hit that button, please read this. These tell you what you need in order to complete this step. Because I selected a landlord address has changed, it's saying to me, I need an updated W-9, and then I needed to select this, right? Because my landlord's address changed, which means the check needs to go to a different place, which means when I complete this, this process is going to ask me for a W-9. It's like that for all of the other situations. You select any of the situations there, it's going to give you a list of items that you need to gather before you hit this button. Please pay attention to those lists. The steps on how to complete them are very similar, if not the same, to the steps that I outlined in lease submission. I'm going to stop sharing and restart CaseWorthy because it is freaking out on me and I don't know why. So please review the lease changes video on YouTube. I'll also make this recording available for the group. Let me reshare my screen. So regardless of what situation you add, it'll give you a list of items. So I just select a different one, new ownership management. You need to collect a new participation agreement form, and you also need a new rental assistance landlord contract. But it's also telling you need to do a stop payment. It says do that immediately, then collect these, and then submit this. It's going to tell you step by step what you need to do in order to make this change happen. When you click these buttons, these forms are very simple. It's just telling you what day should we stop sending the payment to this landlord. Why did we need to stop the payment? Did the client exit the program, or was there a change of management, right? They're very straightforward. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. I just want to show you what they look like, just so that if you do have a question, either now or when you're doing it, please request support. New landlord, again, we've already done this. Look the landlord up in the system and identify the new landlord. And then it'll tell you when the new landlord will change. Let me go back really quickly. I want to show you one more thing before I open it up for questions. I know we're running out of time. If the client plans to move, either mid-lease or if this is expired and there was a lease on file, here you would select the client wants to move. This needs to say yes, okay? This will open up the move request menu. And here is where you submit the move. The form is pretty straightforward. These are the only reasons why a client can request a move. And you can read them. Depending on what you select, there will be more or fewer options, right? So if the landlord terminates the lease or does an ETL, you may need to upload a termination letter, date when the client plans to move, and answer other questions, right? One thing I want to point out is this. Date the client plans to move. This is the date that the rental payment processing team will stop payment. So be careful what you put here. This should be the day that you want rental payment processing to stop making payments for your client. Vowel move, eviction, right? They're pretty straightforward, the questions. Once you hit, let me actually do one. Once you hit submit, that will go to the program team and they will review it and make a determination on whether your client can move. I am so sorry for all the CaseWorthy performance issues today. No problem for the person who just put that they needed to leave. Here is the move request that we submitted. You'll notice that the approval status is pending. If your client ends up saying, no, I don't want to move anymore, you can cancel it by just deleting the request. It doesn't purge it from the system. It just cancels the request. Hit save and hit done. And that's basically it. If a move request does get approved, what will happen is it'll open up the unit ID. So you can do the unit ID for the new unit and start you all over. I know we're right at time. I am happy to stay on if folks have questions and want to ask them. I will make this recording available as well. So with that, thank you so much for attending. Anyone have any questions?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, go for it, Tanisha.
I was just asking if we could get a replica of the new way that the changes have been made for the client participation agreement as well as the landlord rental assistance landlord contract. I noticed that I had 2 documents that were sent back that was changed.
Are you talking about how to complete those documents?
Yes, as far as the amount.
Yeah, I would recommend you watch the full training on how to complete those. I'll show you where they are because rental payment processing is the one who sets those requirements.
Okay.
But really quickly, the videos are here and it's at the bottom here, documents walkthrough. And then let me go back to CaseWorthy dashboard and pull them up for you. Whoops, sorry.
Is that the current update here within the last, would say like month or so?
Yes, yes. So let's look at the client participation agreement. Here's the client participation agreement. let's go all the way to the top. There are these 4 categories, right? You'll fill out the name, the unit address, CaseWorthy ID. Here, you're gonna put the rent. So this is the market rate rent for the client. This is the client's subsidy amount. Okay. Sorry, my bad. This is the client portion here. So how much your client is going to pay. And this is how much the subsidy amount is going to be that we will pay, AFC will pay. And then you'll do the certification statement. So the client will print their name and sign it. Then you will print your name and sign it.
Because I know
Then there's these. Yeah,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead. Sorry.
at first it was the initial rent amount client portion, and then again the initial rent amount. So I noticed that we changed it since then. I just want to make sure that with the change that the correct amount will be sent to the landlord.
Yeah. No, you're good. The client rent portion is going to be here. The subsidy is here. Let's really quickly, I want to go to the landlord rental assistance one. I think you're talking about this one, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the one with the landlord, right? So this is the landlord information, the unit address information. This is the contract date, so like basically the lease date of when they did this. Usually if it's aligned, again, rental payment processing has the details of what dates should be used, but this is the lease start and end date. If there was a security deposit, you would add that here. The rent amount. This is the client rent portion. And then this is how much AFC will pay.
Okay, so the client rent portion on that one would be 0.
Exactly. Yep. Yep.
So
This
the
would be
first,
0. This would be 1,000.
yeah, the first and third line used to be the same. So now they changed it, even though it's pretty much the same thing. I need to get this one updated.
Let me see if there's anything else in here.
No, that's it. My last one.
And the signature page.
Yeah, that was the only thing.
Cool. How do we get the previous screen reportings? They are on the dashboard under click here for more information.
Hi, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Go for it, Jackie.
I had stepped away. In order to get the housing information, you have to be in the client information tab. Is that the tab that you were going to?
Let me switch to what it looks like for your view. So when you log in, it's going to look like this, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Click on client profile,
Okay.
and then you're going to click on housing.
Okay.
And this is where I was.
Oh, because it wasn't showing that the other day that I went into this. It was just showing, it wasn't showing that at all. Okay, so
Yeah,
you
we
must have
just had an
updated some
update.
more. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I got it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Anyone else? If you guys have questions, please feel free to request support. Caesar and I are willing to meet one-on-one with you. If you have specific questions. I know this was a lot of information, and sometimes you kind of have to do it to then realize, oh, what do we do in this scenario, right? So if you get to that point, you're working with a client, and then you forget, oh, how do I do this thing? or it's a step that I didn't show you, feel free to reach out. We will make sure that you get the support you need to do this. So with that, we are, oh, Barbara wants to know where the videos are located. I will show you that before we wrap up. In the housing placement dashboard, when you click on click for more info, there is a text guide and there is a video section that has unit ID, lease submission, lease changes, and utility assistance and documentation here. And when you click on this, it'll go through all of the steps. You know, I like to click out of this because I like to have CaseWorthy and the video open at the same time. So like I can watch the video and do the processing of the payment while I'm watching it. So you could do that as well. So the video is a pop-up, but it is found here on the dashboard. Sweet. All right. Thank you so much for staying 9 minutes over. I am going to end the meeting now. I'll make the recording for this training session available to folks in the chat. So feel free to review. I know that I went through some of the steps pretty fast, but thank you so much for attending our housing training. I will mark everyone who is here today as attended. So hopefully we'll see you at future trainings. Bye-bye.